So, recently in my seemingly never-ending distro-hopping adventures, I hopped over to Debian on a bit of a whim because I was looking for another stable distribution that just works to replace Solus. Because as much as I like Solus, sadly I do have some issues and concerns over the future for Solus, which is the distribution that I've been using up until now, and I've got to say, I've really enjoyed the experience of switching to Debian, even though I initially assumed that I'd hate it. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I switched to Debian and why I'm still using it right now on the Linux Lounge. So, as I said in the intro, I've recently switched to Debian and I've liked it so much that I've installed it on both my desktop and laptop, and now I feel compelled to talk about how that experience has been. The first thing that I really like about Debian is their philosophy towards non-free software. Debian does offer non-free software, but I don't feel like they encourage it, which is, I feel, how it should be. The default ISO of Debian doesn't have any non-free software or the repository containing non-free software enabled by default, but you can just as easily use an unofficial non-free ISO that Debian point to. This will give you non-free software out of the box, and I like this kind of middle-of-the-road approach. They don't encourage people to use non-free proprietary software, but they also don't exclude people who need to use non-free software, whether that be for, hardware, software that they want to use, or that sort of thing. So all in all, for this reason, I've got to say, I really like Debian. Another thing that's really cool about Debian is the installation process. It's really easy. It has a full GUI and all that sort of thing, unlike say Arch, but it's also very configurable. For instance, a Debian installer will let you choose what desktop you want at the conclusion of the installation, and there's some really nice options in there, as well as some other cool stuff. For instance, you can set it up as a printing server, SSH server, and all that sort of thing. So all in all, the installer that you get with Debian is just as easy as say Ubuntu, and much easier than something like say Arch, while also being extremely configurable, far more so than the Ubuntu installer. So all in all, I'd say definitely have a look at the Debian installer in a virtual machine, as it's really nice. So now we've talked about all that, let's talk about my experiences using Debian. Once I had Debian installed, it was time to install all of my software, and that's both the biggest selling point of Debian and the biggest thing that scares people off from using Debian, and that is the fact that the software that's in the Debian repositories tends to be a little bit more on the mature side of things. So when you're using Debian, you don't get the newest versions of software necessarily, and I have to say, that's something that scared me off at first, since I'm used to using Arch and Solus and that kind of thing. But I decided to try Debian anyway because I wanted something stable, and honestly, it's not bad. All of the software that I installed worked perfectly because it was, more mature, so therefore you would expect it to be more stable. Now, that does mean that you won't get all the newest features and stuff, but honestly, you probably don't need the newest features. Past a point, programs are feature complete, and for all of the programs that I need, the versions in the Debian repositories are absolutely feature complete. And honestly, some things that have been added in the new versions of some of the programs that I use are just kind of more nice to have than, being kind of a necessity. In fact, this very video was made in Debian just to prove that yes, indeed, those old packages work fine. In fact, in many ways, I like using the more mature versions better because they're far more reliable and less buggy than the newer versions that you'll find in more bleeding edge distributions like Arch and Solus. So all in all, if you're looking for something stable, be sure to try Debian. I definitely wouldn't be scared off by the older versions of software that you get with Debian. You'll be absolutely fine with the older versions of programs 99.9% of the time. However, with that being said, if you do need newer versions of a program, you can actually install that with using a snap package, an app image, or you can even use the Debian backports repository, which has new versions of programs designed specifically for Debian, and that seems to work pretty well. Another thing that I like about Debian is that it's really no hassle at all. As I said previously, much of the software on Debian is very mature and incredibly stable, but as well as that, it doesn't seem to need much upkeep, unlike Arch, which requires manual intervention every few weeks thanks to a troublesome update or something like that. With Debian, that isn't an issue. Additionally, Debian doesn't need to be constantly updated since the software versions are quite old. With Arch, you get updates multiple times a day, it seems. Now, obviously you don't have to install updates that often, but to some people it can be quite annoying. With Debian, you pretty much only get security updates and major bug fixes. Nothing will come along and break everything. It really is no hassle whatsoever, and I've seen uptimes on Debian of like just months, and you really can run the system for years with no trouble whatsoever. Another thing that I really like about Debian is it's really easy to get software installed or find solutions to problems. The reason being is that Ubuntu is based on Debian, and that means that if something is made for Ubuntu, you can probably get it on Debian. It also means that the Debian system is pretty well understood and there's a lot of troubleshooting guides out there. I've added several repositories on Debian and installed a variety of deb packages that were probably made with Ubuntu in mind, and they all work really well. Additionally, the system is very much like Ubuntu, so I would say that if you're looking for something that just works or something to use to graduate from Ubuntu, well, maybe Debian might be a good choice. Now, all in all, that's why I decided to switch to and stick with Debian, and why you should too. It's really nice, comfortable, stable, and an all-round reliable system that seems to just work. If all of that appeals to you, I would absolutely consider giving Debian a look, especially if you've previously overlooked Debian like I did. Now, to finish up with this video, I have to ask, will I continue to use Debian? Honestly, probably. It's one of those comfy systems that I can't help but, just stick with. Now, if I have some major issue with it, maybe I'll switch away from Debian, but honestly I can't see that happening, so I think for the time being, I'm gonna stick with Debian. But with that said, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.